Yo, what's up everybody? Isaac here coming to you with another New World video. Today's video is going to be a much awaited tanking guide for Season 2. So quite a bit has changed in the metas and things since my last tanking guide videos. So now that Season 2 is here, we even have some more changes yet. Namely, the number one biggest change in Season 2 is, well, Whirling Blade. It got some significant buffs, so is it now viable? Well, it is what I am running in my current build in Season 2. So let's get right into it. So number one, most important thing, we are aiming towards this video being like an endgame tanking guide, but most of this is still going to apply if you are a new tank getting started, and it's going to help you know what you should be working towards. So this is going to be focused on the depths. Specifically for the walkthrough, we are going to do a walkthrough along with this guide, and it is very important that you understand the mutation. So in this mutation, it's a void mutation. So if you go down to the bottom of the first section, you're going to see that enemies deal 50% of all damage as void damage. So we are going to be stacking as much void damage mitigation as we can. And one thing that's incredibly important is right here, if you read on the bottom, Shriveled Void. When selecting the lowest percent health player, all players are given Shriveled Weaken, reducing their damage by 50% and damage-based healing by 50%. This is significant. You need to understand this mechanic if you are going to run M10s. So periodically, the lowest player is going to get a purple circle around them, and if your teammates do not touch that purple circle, well, they are going to receive 50% less outgoing damage and 50% less healing outgoing if they are the healer. So very, very important to understand this. Everybody needs to be touching that purple circle. The tank can get away without touching that purple circle because he is not being relied upon to do the DPS, so not as big of a deal, but all the DPS and all the healers, they need to be touching that purple circle every time when possible. So let's jump into it. What are we going to cover in this guide? We are going to cover gear, we're going to cover weapons, we're going to cover jewelry, we are going to cover our attributes, we're going to cover our weapon tree builds, and all of that good stuff. So in the current meta, everything is all about adding as much weaken as you possibly can and doing as much crowd control to the mob as you possibly can. Obviously, other big huge benefits are adding rend. It's going to help kill the enemies faster, but namely it's all about weaken and crowd control, and then secondarily adding as much rend as you possibly can. So as a tank, our job is obviously to hold aggro and do as much crowd control as we can, and we're also going to be trying to apply weaken as much as we can. So let's start covering the gear. What are we looking for on our gear? Number one, obviously you need to have ward. Season 2, we still need ward. So two perks that I look for is ward and refreshing if possible. And then I do prefer if I can have strength in this slot, but constitution works just fine as well. So you can get this full captain's expedition gear from the depths. It does drop at the high level mutations, so you might not be able to start off with this gear getting started, but just anything with corrupted ward and a gem slot is enough to get you from M1 up till M10 till you can start getting some of those better drops. So there we go. I have 4 pieces of this captain's expedition gear. So 4 pieces, corrupted ward, refreshing. We also have physical aversion. We receive 3.9% less damage from ranged physical attacks. So basically that's going to be archers. But that perk, it's there, it's helpful, but it's not that massively important. And I do have one different chest piece, and I mainly am wearing this chest because it has sturdy energy. When blocking a hit well below 30% stamina gain, 39% stamina regeneration for 6 seconds. This can also be on your shield or something like that, but I do like having this chest piece. Gives me this extra bonus here. And then refreshing ward, it's fine as a tank too. Definitely don't consider it to be a best perk. Some people say as a tank that's the best perk you can have. You're getting hit all the time, so that's going to help bring your cooldowns down fast. But reality is, as a tank, you don't want to just eat tons and tons of damage. You're better off learning how to block at the appropriate times, learning how to use your stuns at the appropriate times, learning how to dodge at the appropriate times, rather than just face tanking tons of damage. And if you do that, you're going to have to just crank your con way up, and well, that's not ideal. So ideally our job is to grab aggro and hold aggro and do stuns and that kind of thing, and buff our team as much as we possibly can. But secondarily, we do want to add damage when we can. So we are going to be running with our attributes. We are going to go with 200 constitution, generally speaking, and 310 strength. I do not have a food buff on currently, but typically my favorite food to take is going to be carrot cake. It's super cheap, so you can just buy tons of it. It gives you constitution and it gives you health. But sometimes I will also have this beef broccoli, however you say it, which is just straight 40 strength for 60 minutes. So if you have tons of constitution on your gear, sometimes it can be helpful to have just a straight strength food buff. But so we did get our food buff going on, so let's adjust our stats. So typically I'm going to go to 200 constitution, 311 strength. You get that one extra bonus attribute if you level your shield up to 625. So definitely not an absolute must-have. You can have a shield that's 590 and it'll be fine because shield doesn't count in with your gear score. But when you can find a really good shield, it's worthwhile to just level it all the way up to 625. You're going to get extra damage mitigation, and you're going to also do extra damage as well. So do recommend when you find the right shield, you go ahead and level that up. So on our gear, like I mentioned, ward and refreshing are the two main things I'm looking for. You can get a couple of weapon perks if you would like to, but not like absolute must-have by any means. On your shields, whenever possible, I like to have Bane plus ward, or else Bane plus, say for this mutation, void protection. So if we do have a void protection shield, it's going to give us 10% damage absorption instead of 5%, but this 5% is still beneficial, so nothing wrong there. Really strong shield. It does also have accelerated resolve, which is a nice perk to have. After triggering Defender's Resolve, increase movement speed by 33% and incoming healing. So extra movement speed helps us get in and out of trouble faster. Also, it's going to help our healing be increased. In case we get in trouble, we can get healed up a little bit faster. So that is kind of a nice thing to have. But anyways, so there you have it. Our gear, ward, refreshing, constitution or strength. There you go. Perfect. On a chest piece, we do have this piece switched out for sturdy energy and ward. And, not an absolute must-have. You could have 5-piece refreshing ward, and that's going to be perfect. So that's our gear. You can get away with lower gear at the lower mutations, but the more and more you work towards end game, you do want a good, strong 2-perker at minimum. So how about our jewelry? Our amulet, the number one thing we're looking for is protection of the type that the dungeon is, and currently we are running the Depths, which is a void mutation, as we already discussed. So enemies are going to deal 50% of all damage as void damage. So that is why we are running a void protection amulet, and the other thing we want on here is health. So a 2-perker is more than enough, and then make sure your attributes in the right place, strength or con, good to go. Our ring, this is my favorite ring to run. Simon's Hacksilver ring. You can get this one from the Starstone mutation. Strongly suggest you farm this one up when you get a chance. Gives us slash damage, and we do have a hammer which is going to do strike damage, but mainly our sword and shield is going to be our main damage dealer. Plus we want to have our sword and shield out as much as possible because, well, we'll talk more about that later. But our earring, I definitely highly recommend these two perks, Refreshing Toast and Despised. So as you get towards that end game content, really, really important that you are getting Despised on your earring. It's going to help you hold aggro a little bit better. So more and more as you get towards that end game content, you want your DPS to be anywhere from 5 con to 50 con. So it's really important that you are holding as much aggro as possible. Having Despised on your earring is going to help you do that. So if you do get lucky enough to get a third perk that's helpful, sweet. Refreshing Evasion, awesome. If you had Refreshing here, maybe even better. But then we got the attribute in the right place, either Strength or Con, good to go. And our weapons. Main thing I'm looking for on my sword is to have Refreshing Move and Bane. A 2-perker here is perfectly fine. Refreshing Move, it's going to help our cooldowns come back a lot faster. On a sword and shield, our main taunt is going to be this Defender's Resolve, and it has a pretty massively large cooldown, but having Refreshing Move on our sword is going to help bring those cooldowns back a whole lot faster. On our hammer, a couple different options we can go with here, but the 2 different options I like is to either have Bane, Refreshing Move, or else I like to have Bane and, well, where is that one at? Sundering Shockwave. So I like using both of these weapons. So Corrupted Bane, Sundering Shockwave. I also put a Leeching Carnelian in this one just for the fun to test this one out. Usually I'll go more with a damage, whatever these things are called. But a damage rune, what are they called again? Ruined Glass, a damage Ruined Glass over Leeching, but I've decided to give that Leeching one a try again just for the fun of it, and definitely a very viable way to go. So on your hammer, you're either going to be looking for Bane, Refreshing Move, or Bane, Sundering Shockwave, or the third option that would be extremely viable, and I'm tempted to go with myself, is one that has Sundering Shockwave and Refreshing Move. So trying to get a 3-perker with Sundering Shockwave and Refreshing Move is extremely hard, and they are extremely expensive. Say you get a 3-perker that's Sundering Shockwave and it has Refreshing Move, and then it has a good damage perk. Those are like 300k type of expensive weapons, so not necessarily expecting everybody to have one of those, but Bane, Sundering Shockwave, or Bane Refreshing Move, or Refreshing Move plus Sundering Shockwave is going to do you just fine and dandy. Sundering Shockwave inflicts the rend, reducing target's armor by 14%. That's going to allow our teammates to do a lot of extra damage. Well, a decent amount of extra damage anyways, so very nice to have. But if we go Refreshing Move instead, one of our jobs as a tank is to help with the crowd control. Make sure we're keeping the enemies stunned a lot so they can't hurt anyone. But if we have Refreshing Move, that's going to bring those cooldowns back a lot faster, so we can go ahead and put those knockdowns back on the mob skin a lot quicker. So it's kind of a toss-up between those two. I tend to run Sundering Shockwave more often, but Refreshing Move is also very, very handy to have. And also on this one, I did get an okay 3rd perk, Shirking Nature. After dodging, you deal 40% extra base weapon damage, which is nice. As a tank, often we are going to be dodging an attack, so that's going to perk reasonably often. But anyways, any of those options as a tank on your hammer are going to do you just fine and dandy. Our Heart Rune, this is my go-to as a tank. Grasping Heart Vine. Cunning Heart Rune of Grasping Vines. What does this do for us? Summons vines around you that deal 100% Heart Rune damage and root enemies. So this is a major part of it. We root the enemies in place. We can use this one offensively or defensively. Say we got a bunch of mobs around us. We're getting low. Our healer's in trouble, so he can't drop a heal on us. Well, we can go ahead and root everything in place, and then we can escape and save ourselves that way. But preferably the way we like to use it is offensively. So we go ahead and we do a nice pull. We grab all these mobs, and then we block, and then our DPS come up behind us. They drop a massive gravity well. And then as that gravity well wears off, we go ahead and we drop our Leeching Vines, so we can root all of the enemies in place, and they stay grouped up in that nice tight group, and our DPS can continue to mob down that nice massively grouped up group of mobs. So preferably we're using that offensively to help with the grouping, but when need be we can use it defensively to save our lives and our teammates' lives. But so yeah, that covers the gear, covers our jewelry, weapons, and our heart rune. So let's go ahead and jump on to the weapon trees. Sword and shield. Obviously, as a tank, we're running sword and shield. For the most part, there's times when you can run hammer hatchet for certain types of situations if you're doing speed runs and whatnot, but for the most part, we're using sword and shield. Endgame tanking, I think leadership is an absolute must-have. You can get away with defensive formation, and it can still definitely work in certain ways if you're just doing huge, massive pulls and you're helping keep your teammates alive by having this defensive formation. It can be viable, but still, I do believe leadership is a must-have for end-game tanking. And left side of the tree, it's mostly set in stone. Let's go ahead and respec and do this together. Empowered stab, successful heavy attacks grant you 30% empower. So we are trying to get down to leadership, and in order to do that, we are required to unlock 10 abilities before we get this. So the ones I'm taking, they're set in stone. We're taking Empowered Stab. We're going to take Achilles Heel. The final attack on your light attack chain inflicts a 20% slow for 2 seconds. And successfully hitting with a heavy attack, you lose 1 debuff. Nope, we're not going to take that. Not really helpful. Sword and Shield, critical strike chance increased by 10%. Extra damage that we can output, so that's huge. Move 33% faster while blocking. That could be nice, but I'm not taking it. You could argue to take this one as a tank, but kind of weights and balances. You're weighing and balancing the other options you have, and I just think there's other better ones. When you block an attack, you gain a stack of 3% in power for 5 seconds. So obviously, we're going to be doing a decent amount of blocking, so it's going to help us gain some empower, gain some outgoing damage. More damage we do, the more threat we build. More damage we do, also the faster mobs die. So abilities deal 10% more damage to slowed foes. So we're going to be slowing foes with our hammer. We're going to be slowing foes with this perk here. The final attack inflicts slow for 2 seconds. So more slow, more damage to slowed foes, definitely going to come in handy. And while your health is full, deal 15% more damage. As a tank, we're constantly sitting in heals, so this is going to perk pretty often. So a nice 15% damage boost, kind of a no-brainer. On critical, gain 20% haste for 5 seconds. I actually really do love haste. So you get haste, it allows you to run around and group up mobs faster. If you get in trouble, it gives you a better chance at escaping successfully, so we are taking this one. So that's basically all of these passives are set in stone for me. Every time, that is what I'm running. And from there, in order to get leadership, you do need 3 more. So it is still going to be viable to take Leaping Strike. Leaping Strike, leap forward, dealing 100% weapon damage and staggering your target. Why is this so nice? Well, you can have a mob chasing down a healer or something, and you have this Leaping Strike, gives you a fast movement speed to jump really quickly and regain the aggro of that mob. And then if you do take this one, you're going to go here. If you hit a foe below 30% health, deal 50% more damage. That's not massive. This isn't going to come in very handy because once the mobs get low, as a tank, we're moving on to the next group. So not really going to help us tons, but we're going to take it and we're going to come down here. Unsuccessful hit, inflict 30% slow for 3 seconds. So if we do take this, it's also going to help us do more damage with this perk here. But it's also, a lot of times when we're using this to steal aggro from the healer of a mob that's trying to mob down our healer. So we hit him, we stagger him, and then we add slow. Chances are he's going to be unsuccessful in chasing down our healer. So if we are going Leaping Strike, we're going to take this one all the way down to the bottom. But we are not taking Leaping Strike any longer. That used to be my go-to, but that is one thing that has changed in Season 2. So Whirling Blade. This is the go-to for me in the current meta. Quickly spin it around, extending your sword out, dealing 2 hits of 80% weapon damage to all foes within 2 meters. And then, Whirling Blade, we come down the next step. It inflicts 15% rend. This is a huge part of it. So we can do some massive AoE rend, 15% rend to tons of mobs in one quick blow. And if we come down, Whirling Blade reduces its own cooldown by 5% for each enemy hit, so we're typically going to hit a bunch of mobs, get some nice quick cooldown reductions on Whirling Blade, so we're for sure coming all the way down. And with that perk, it opens up the ability to have this leadership perk. While holding a sword, the damage of all group members is increased 10%. This is massive. You have 3 high output DPS, and if you crank up their DPS by 10% more, it's gonna make a very noticeable difference in stuff getting cleared out a lot faster. So for me, this is my go-to build set in stone for the time being. So some people are still going to be addicted enough to Leaping Strike. They're not going to want to get rid of it. But I do think Whirling Blade is extremely strong in the current meta of things. So on the right side, there's a few different options you can go with the right side, but 2 things we are taking for sure: Shield Rush and Defender's Resolve, 100% guaranteed. And Shield Rush, the only reason it's good is right here. We get this extra perk. On a successful hit, all enemies within 5 meters are inflicted by 20% weaken for 10 seconds. So that is massive. Current meta of things, the more weaken you can apply to everything, the better off you are. But let's get going with our passives. What are we going to take for passives? This is an absolute no-brainer. You're going to take grants an additional 15% physical armor. As a tank, we are trying to make everything hit us as much as possible, or at least attempt to hit us. So if we have more physical armor by 15% free, we're going to take it. Reduce damage from all magical types by 10%. This one's pretty much a no-brainer. Sure, you could get away without it, but just, elemental resistance, and we're doing mutations. 50% of damage is converted to elemental. Well, let's just say this is pretty safe to say it's a no-brainer. Possibly you could say, no, I don't want to take it, but that's a hard one to pass up on. But let's take a look here. When you block with a shield, sword, and shield cooldowns are reduced by 1%. That could be helpful, but 1%, that's certainly not massive, and we'd just have to sit there and block tons and tons of attacks for this to perk. Tons. So just kind of a weights and balances. I think there's better ones to take. And we can't take this one yet, but once we're on coming down, let's check this one out. The third attack in here, light attack chain, deals 15% more damage and causes more threat. So very viable. If we can add more threat, it's definitely a good thing. And 15% more damage for one attack, that's not massive. So that's not like make or break 15% more damage on our single last attack of our light chain. But that's it's a nice little bonus. So let's take a look at the rest of them. Stamina damage is reduced by 15% when blocking a melee attack with a shield. Very viable perk to take. Sometimes I take it, sometimes I do not. For now, I'm not taking it. Our goal as an endgame tank is not to sit there and just eat. We're not just trying to sit there and block everything. We're trying to dodge things. We're trying to do damage. So this is a very viable perk. You can definitely use this endgame, but sometimes I take it, sometimes I don't. But more and more, this one is becoming a guaranteed I'm taking it. When you block an attack, gain 20%. I do sometimes not take it, just playing around with different builds, but when you block an attack, gain 20% fortify for 5 seconds. So this one is nice. There's other options you could take, but this one is going to apply to us, fortify, extra survivability every time we block an attack. So it's kind of getting to the point for me that this is a no-brainer. Let's take this one. And we come down here, gain 15 stamina when you hit a target with Shield Bash or Shield Rush. We're not taking Shield Bash, even though I love this ability. It's just too hard not to take Shield Rush because of the weaken. Only reason, if it wasn't for this, I would love to take Shield Bash instead of Shield Rush. But we do need this weaken, so kind of a no-brainer. So we do have this one ability, we can gain 15 stamina. So very, very, very viable perk to take. But I do tend to not take it because I'm trying to be good enough to not have to be reliant upon gaining 15 stamina back. So I'd prefer that perk can go somewhere else if at all possible. Very viable to take it though. So feel free to take it if that is one you are liking. And down here, all incoming healing and regeneration is increased by 10%. I love this one. It's not an absolute must-have, but it's one of those last couple of perks that you can decide, do I want it here, do I want it somewhere else? I think this is a very strong one. It allows you to be a little bit more aggressive, and you will get your heals topped off that much faster. So now we covered, these are the kind of the must-haves for me. And then the other must-haves, let's go ahead and select those right away. And that basically leaves us with 2 additional points, and there's different options we could take with it. Do you come all the way down here? On a successful hit, all enemies within 5 meters are slowed. It is nice when you can add slow. If I had extra points to spend, I'd love to have this perk, but it kind of comes down to a weight and balance of, well, we only have 2 left, so what's going to give us the biggest benefit? This one is extremely nice. If your health is above 50%, damage reduction is increased by 20%. That is when you trigger Defender's Resolve. So we read this. For 8 seconds, reduce incoming base damage from attackers by 30%. And reduce the attacker's stamina damage while blocking by 20%. There's many times when we're going to go ahead and we're going to trigger this Defender's Resolve, but we're going to switch right off of it immediately. So we're not even going to get like full benefits of this Defender's Resolve by hanging out on our Sword and Shield, because oftentimes we're going to go ahead and trigger this, and then we're going to hit them with Shield Rush, and then we're going to switch over to our Hammer, add some debuffs with our Hammer, and so on, so forth. So these are very nice perks here, but I'm getting more and more to the point where I'm going to skip out on them. But a lot of times when you trigger this, your health is going to be above 50%, so you're going to have increased 20% damage reduction, but that's only when we trigger Defender's Resolve. So personally, I think this perk here is more important than this one. You could argue, let's not take this and let's take this instead, but this one's going to apply basically all the time. This one's only going to apply when you use Defender's Resolve. So the last one is Restoration. When Defender's Resolve ends, heal 15% of your max health. This can be handy. It can be a nice health top off when you get yourself in trouble. But I have ran it oftentimes, but for the most part, I'm just thinking, yeah, there's better options. So once again, these are the guaranteed perks we're taking. We got 2 more to spend, so we're not going to spend them here. And what are the other options? Well, we're going to skip out on this one. Like I said, very, very viable. You could go here. Wouldn't blame you. This one, stamina damage reduced by 50% when blocking a ranged attack with a shield. Yeah, I'm pretty much not going to be taking this one almost ever. So, yeah, it's not going to help us enough to be worthwhile. So not gonna take this one. We're gonna pass up on this one. We're just trying to get to the point where we're either dodging attacks and then we're getting aggressive and going on the offensive. So we're just trying to, very viable, take this and take this, and it's going to add a lot to your survivability from a stamina standpoint. As a tank, when you run out of stamina, you get in trouble. So this would be an incredibly viable build. Would not blame you at all if you ran it, but I'm skipping out on it. I'm going to go here. Third attack causes more damage and more threat. So very, very viable when as a tank you are doing more threat. And the last one I am going to take, all incoming healing and regeneration is increased by 10%. That's pretty huge because it allows us to be more aggressive. So in the current meta, this is kind of the build that I am going to go with. So pretty set in stone. There's a few of them that I'm going to play with a little bit here and there. But for me, this is my go-to tanking build. And I do play with different ones all the time just for testing sakes and so on and so forth, but this is my go-to. So there we go, Sword and Shield. How about our Hammer? Well, let's go ahead and respec this one as well. So let's go over this one pretty in depth as well. So on the right side, I am only taking these 2 here. There's other options. You definitely could take Wrecking Ball. I think most are taking Wrecking Ball, and I think a lot of people in their guides are saying this is one of your go-tos. It's very strong. Strike the ground with your Warhammer, dealing 9% weapon damage and knocking down your targets. In certain ways, I actually like this one better than Clear Out. but there's a few different reasons that we're skipping out and we're taking Clear out instead of Wrecking Ball. Or you could definitely take Wrecking Ball instead of Path of Destiny, because Wrecking Ball is a knockdown, Path of Destiny is just a stagger. So, very viable option, but we are not going to take it with this build. And we'll talk a little bit more on that why as we move along. So, let's take a look at the rest of these passive. All Warhammer abilities apply exhaust, slowing target stamina regeneration by 20%. This could come in handy for anything that does have a stamina bar, but kind of weights and balances don't find it useful enough. Heavy attacks reduce cooldowns by 7%. So this can be nice, but we're going to pass up on it, and I'll explain more about why a little bit later as we get to some of the other perks. Definitely one I've played around with quite a bit, but let's see. Not taking it anyways. So let's take a look at this one. Gain in power on heavy attacks, increasing damage by 20% for 4 seconds. So if you're trying to have really good DPS, this is where the synergy is going to work. Bring in the heavy attacks. You select this, increase armor penetration by 10% for all warmer basic attacks. So that's going to apply to your lights too, but your heavies as well. Then you take this one, adds grit to Warhammer heavy attacks. Also grants 12% damage reduction while grit is active. So with this build that we are going to be showing you, we're not really taking advantage of heavy attacks at all. So the grit to heavy attacks, not super going to apply to us. But there is a build you can do with it, but I don't think it's quite as good, to be quite frankly honest with you. But it also grants 12% damage reduction while grit is active. And, well, there's times, well, these two abilities, they have grit. And sometimes we're trying to get these abilities off when we are in trouble. And it's going to give you 12% damage reduction while you're doing these abilities, so that's kind of helpful. Damage reduction when we are in a sketchy situation, always a good thing. So I do find this one worthwhile to take, mainly just because of the 12% damage reduction while we have grit. So what else do we have on this side? We could increase heavy damage by 50% against targets under 30% health. Problem is with this, as a tank, once things get below 30% health, we're not trying to finish them off. That's our DPS's job. We're moving along to the next pull. So anytime something's like do more damage under 30%, that's not like a massive bonus for you as a tank. And the hammer is just not a DPS weapon. It's there for utility. Then move along to your DPS weapon. And then the last perk down here, deal 35% extra damage for 1 second after taking damage. Sure, that would be nice to have if we had endless abilities. But once again, hammer, not a damage weapon. And, well, you're better off using your hammer for utility than switching off to, well, as a tank to our sword and shield because of the leadership perk. Well, also we're going to do more damage with the sword and shield for the most part. But also, the leadership perk is going to help our DPS do more damage. So we don't want to be focusing on trying to doing damage with our hammer. It's all about utility. So hammer, utility, sword and shield, damage. Keep that in mind. So that covers the left side. We're only taking these 2 perks. So, Crowd Crusher side of things. A few different options we have here. And we're going to take a lot of them. Increase armor by 20% if surrounded by 2 or more enemies within 3 meters. This is going to be perking all the time. We're going to go ahead, we're going to do a nice big pull, and we're going to get lots of mobs surrounding us. Pull out our hammer to do the knockdowns and stuns and all that good stuff. So yeah, no brainer, we're taking it. And then after hitting target with an active debuff, gain haste, increasing movement speed by 50% for 3 seconds. Very viable. After 2 light attacks with Warhammer, debuff durations on player are reduced by 25%. Yeah, these debuffs, I just don't do them. I don't know that they help you really hardly at all in mutations. So mutations, they have certain debuffs that you can't cleanse anyways. So those are the important ones, and since you can't cleanse them anyways, let's not worry about taking debuff reductions. So reduce stamina consumption by 30% when blocking melee attacks. Definitely not a must-have, but I do find this one pretty handy. Ideally, when we're blocking with a sword and shield, but there are times we group up a bunch of mobs, and in between our abilities, we're going to block for a second, and if we can avoid becoming stam drained, it's massive. So 30% stamina consumption reduction, blocking melee attacks, that's kind of handy. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to take this one. Reduce damage taken by 10% while sprinting. So oftentimes when we're getting set up for a pull, we're going to have our hammer out and we're going to get that 10% increased damage reduction while we're running around. And a lot of times the first thing we're going to open up with is going to be a hammer ability. Sometimes it's not, sometimes it's going to be our defender's resolve, but go ahead, pull out your hammer, run past mobs, and extra 10% reduction. Another one we are for sure taking. Reduce Warhammer cooldowns by 7% when using light attacks against targets with an active debuff. So this is only going to apply when they have an active debuff, but there basically should never be a time in a dungeon when you're attacking something that does not have a debuff. Always going to be opening up fights with debuffs. We hit them with our shockwave, it's going to be a debuff. So this is going to be massive. The other option, you come over here, heavy attacks reduce cooldowns by 7%, and you don't even need the debuff. But you get your light attacks off a lot faster than you can get heavy attacks off, and they're both the same amount of cooldown reduction, so I think this one's a no-brainer to take. Light attack reduction over heavy attack reduction, so we're taking it. Deal 15% increased damage against targets affected by Warhammer debuffs, so not massively important, just comes with weights and balances. Is there a better one for us to take than doing extra damage? Well, we're going to take this one because we do, we got to spend it somewhere. And at the end of the day, it is going to be one that we, I think is better than all the rest of them to a point. So, one incredibly important passive that much of my build, much of the way I run is built around. Right here, Prevailing Spears. Heal for 35% of damage dealt when using a Crowd Crusher ability. So, what is a Crowd Crusher ability? Any one of these 3 abilities. So one reason why I take these 3 abilities, there's more than just this reason. You could still get away with just having 2 abilities that make use of this passive, but it's pretty huge having all 3 abilities make use of this passive. Pretty good synergy. So sometimes as a tank you can get yourself in trouble, but you can rely on some pretty good self-healing by having this passive and healing for 35% of damage dealt when you do use your abilities. So this one's huge. I love this perk. Definitely a go-to for me. So all of these abilities we're going to take all the way to the bottom. No brainer. Shockwave, slam your hammer to the ground and it causes a 3-meter radius earthquake that deals 60% weapon damage, staggers and stuns everything that you hit. The ability has grit, so we talked before, we have this ability, damage reduction, well we have grit, this has grit. This one we're taking it all the way to the bottom. When we take it down one step, it adds a 10% weaken. 10% is not huge, but since nobody else is potentially running Shockwave, we're adding an additional 10% damage weaken to the mobs that nobody else is adding. So adding weaken is super important in mutations, and every different type of weaken you add can stack, but 2 different people adding the exact same weaken does not stack. So you say, well, Enfeebling Skewer, it's so good we should have 10 Enfeebling Skewers being run in the group, but they don't stack, only one of them is going to apply. Definitely viable to have more than 1 DPS with Enfeebling Skewer, but nonetheless, you need to have more options for weaken than just one single weaken. So this expands the range of Shockwave from 3 meters to 4 meters, no brainer. This one you're taking all the way to the bottom, no matter what, every single time. Clear out, wide swing that knocks back targets. The only problem I have with this one is typically you're trying to group mobs up. The problem with clear out is sometimes it knocks mobs around, and if they're grouped up nicely, sometimes it spreads them out. The only thing I don't love about this ability, but we are going to be using it. So hitting a target with clear out, it grants Fortify, increasing armor by 20% to all of friendlies for 4 seconds that are within 6 meters. 6 meters, that's a pretty big area. So a lot of times you do a pull, use this Crowd Crusher clear out and this Power Cleaner ability. It's going to give extra damage mitigation to anyone within 6 meters of you. So that's pretty massive. Clear out's cooldown is reduced by 5% per enemy hit with the ability. Also very, very nice. Going to help bring the cooldown off a lot faster. It's already only a 13-second cooldown, but we get 5% reduction on hitting a bunch, and the cooldown is reduced even more. Using clear out on a target grants haste, increasing movement speed by 30% for 3 seconds. So not an absolute must-have, but I do love to have haste. Sometimes when we're using these abilities, we're in trouble, so we go ahead and we knock them down, but then also we have haste, so the mobs are knocked down, but we now also have haste, so it helps us get out of trouble if need be. So you can see now that opened up the chance for us to select this Aftershock. So we'll talk more about that later though. And we are rocking with Path of Destiny. Why do I love Path of Destiny? Well, I'll demonstrate that a little bit more later on, but it is a ranged attack. We no longer have Leaping Strike from our Sword and Shield, which kind of gives us an ability to jump at a mob that's attacking somebody, so we can use Path of Destiny as a ranged attack to gain back. Well, for one, once we take it down to this next passive, it staggers the mob. So if we have a mob that's attacking our healer or our DPS off in the distance, but we can reach them with Path of Destiny, we can stagger them, and that's going to interrupt them. And we come all the way to the bottom. Ability cooldown reduced by 5% for each enemy hit with Path of Destiny. So definitely going to be taking this one. Extra cooldown is extra good. So then whenever a target is affected by a crowd control effect, they are slowed by 20% for 4 seconds. And we are for sure taking this one. This is one of the things that helps make Path of Destiny so good. It's also going to apply to our next ones, not as massively because say they're stunned for 2 seconds, and well, the slow is only going to apply for 2 extra seconds beyond that. Crowd, the clear out, we knock them down, and they're knocked down for a while, so the slow is only going to apply for like the next 2 seconds after they get back up from being knocked down. But Path of Destiny, it only does a stagger as long as we come down here, but once we add this ability, it also adds a 20% slow for 4 seconds, so we hit mobs with our Path of Destiny, and then they're slowed for 4 seconds. They're going to have a hard time chasing down our teammates, and well, just kind of handy to have. So I do love this passive or this ultimate skill, and so that's the one I rock with. And one of the options here is these are, so basically this is my tree, this is what I'm going with, but two of the ones that I can switch out here. I can get rid of this one, deal 15% increased damage against targets affected by Warhammer debuffs. So as a tank, we're not going to be doing crazy amounts of damage anyways, so an extra 15% damage with our Warhammer, sure, it could be helpful, but the other option that we can take is after hitting a target with an active debuff, gain haste, and well, increase movement speed by 15% for 3 seconds. So do we want haste or do we want extra damage? So we're not doing crazy amount of damage already as it is. So as a tank, if we can get haste, it's going to help us move along and keep grouping things up faster, help us get in and out of trouble faster. So I do tend to lean more into this one, but these are two that you could switch out. But other than that, this is basically the build I'm rocking with. There are certain times, certain dungeons, I'm going to get rid of Path of Destiny and go with Wrecking Ball. But especially in Season 2, well, the synergy that works with Prevailing Spirit and having full Crowd Crusher side is very, very nice. But especially in Season 2, now that we are getting rid of our Leaping Strike on our Sword and Shield so we don't have that movement ability, well, when we have Path of Destiny, it is going to help us have a ranged attack. And here's a little example of how it's going to help. Let's say we're right here. There's a bunch of mobs. We're coming from behind us and we're running through. We're grouping up mobs. We're gathering them. We're line of sighting them. And we get here and okay, we're ready to block the mobs, but we're trapped here. We can't get through. And our DPS, they ended up grabbing aggro and they're fighting with some mobs way back there, but we're trapped. We can't get to them, but we have our Path of Destiny, so we can hit them through the mobs that are blocking us, and a lot of times that's more than enough to regain aggro, and it's also going to stagger those mobs. It's going to add slow to them, so it should give us our DPS, healer, whoever might be over there, a chance to recover. So that Path of Destiny, it is so useful. It's incredible. Some people say that, yeah, it's not something you should be running as a tank, but It's awesome. I love it, especially in Season 2 when I am taking Whirling Blade instead of Leaping Strike. So, there you have it. We covered our trees for our Sword and Shield, covered our trees for our Warhammer. We covered our armor, our weapons, our Heart Rune, our jewelry, but one more bonus thing we are going to talk about: gear sets. One thing that people still don't realize, and I do not blame them for realizing it. So we go and we read the information on this mutation. And we mouse over and go to the bottom of the first section. Abyssal. I already talked about this, but enemies deal 50% of all damage as void damage. So you would assume all enemies deal 50% of all damage as void damage. Right? Wrong. For some reason, they leave this tricky little thing out, where the bosses do not convert damage. The main bosses, they don't convert damage. So sometimes when you get to a boss, when possible, you want to swap out some gear. For the depths, we get super lucky since it is a void mutation this week. The very first main boss we fight, the bombs do void damage, so we're super set for that boss already. We don't have to change anything, we just run right into the boss fight and we get things on the road. But when we get to Thorpe, well, I have a Thorpe set. I have this labeled Thorpe DPS, but reality is it is my Thorpe tank. Did some runs as a DPS, and little bonus, hit that subscribe. I will be dropping a DPS guide. It's actually pretty important because as a tank, you can't do a good job unless you have DPS that are doing a good job as well. You can just absolutely have blown runs and people will be blaming, oh tank, you're not holding any aggro, but that's because the DPS have no clue what they're doing. So I am going to be dropping a DPS guide as well, endgame DPS guide, so go ahead and hit the subscribe and keep your eyes out for that to come out shortly. So you need synergy of a whole group working together. But back to what we were talking about. There's a little bonus thing here. The bosses do not convert damage. So sometimes if you are playing that endgame content and you want to make sure you can just cruise right through the bosses, you're going to need a full change in gear. So we get to Thorpe and, well, we have this Thorpe set on. What do I have on this Thorpe set? Thorpe, he does slash damage and he hurts a lot if you are not set up to have slash damage mitigation. So I have this full second set. The majority of this set was my very first tanking set that I used to go from M1 to M10, and it is terrible stuff, but let's take a look at it. It has ward, has con and strength. That's all we need. Resilient, it doesn't work in dungeons. But the bonus is it has a gem slot. So this is what I used to go from M1 to M10. And, well, once we slot a moonstone, a cut pristine moonstone into our gem slot, we get plus 5% slash damage absorption. So that's really all this set is for. We have an extra set all with corrupted ward, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to slot, the slash ward gem into all of it. I do have one extra piece that's a nice piece. Since I ended up leveling up this second chest piece, well, I'm just go ahead and use my Expedition Captain's chest piece for my second set on the boss. So full gear set swap, and including weapons. I didn't need to swap out my sword, but I did just for the fun of it, and there's a little reason why, and we'll talk about that. But anyways, basically these are all just one perkers. That's all you honestly need. One perkers. If you're gonna level up a full set, I'd suggest to try and get 2 perkers. But this is my first set. It's all terrible. It has corrupted ward. Resilient doesn't help you anything. Crippling Reap, we're not running Axe, so it doesn't do anything for us. Just the 1 perkers. They got corrupted ward, that's it. That's all we need. And that way we can slot these gem, get tons of slash damage absorption. One little bonus, how do you know how much slash damage absorption you have? You come down here, mouse over, and it's going to tell you. We have 50% slash damage resistance. So that is very, very handy. And, well, what do we got on our shield? We're rocking the shield that's got slash ward, hated, sturdy. Sturdy is nice. You receive 9.8% less stamina damage. Not an absolute must-have, but, you know, just make sure, if you possibly can, for Thorpe, get a slash shield ward. Shield, and you'll be good to go. I am stacking tons of hated for Thorpe, and there is a reason. He is super finicky. He's super tricky. No matter how much aggro you hold on him, no matter how much you taunt him, he still wants to chase after people. So what I do, I stack up tons of slash damage absorption and as much hated threat as I can. I even have a sword here that has hated on it. And of course, I have an earring here that has despised on it. So we're maxed out on threat. So there's a reason for that. And actually, when I go into Thorpe, I'm resetting my attributes and I just crank up my con. I hit respec and I just crank my con up all the way. And my goal is, I am just going to sit there and attack Thorpe as much as possible, build up as much threat as possible. Every time he feigns to go after one of our teammates, I say, hey, no, you better get back here. I don't want you chasing my teammates. Focus on me. And that way I can eat a lot of his damage by having tons of slash damage absorption and then just crank up my con and call it good. But one other thing. You see, I have a spear out. What? You're a tank? You're using spear? What in the world? Well, that is because Enfeebling Skewer. One of the most important perks in the game. Have Enfeebling Skewer on your spear. And if you're the tank and you're applying Enfeebling Skewer, that means your DPS, they don't absolutely have to be dependent upon having Enfeebling Skewer. They can have a different type of weaken. And the more weaken you keep stacking up, and also I can just open up the fight with Enfeebling Skewer. It allows our DPS to get in there and more safely apply different types of weaken. So this is the way I like to rock. A lot of the boss fights is I go ahead and sword and shield and spear for a lot of boss fights. So that means we are applying tons and tons of weaken. So we open up with Enfeebling Skewer. That's 44% damage reduction. We're going to try and skewer them. Well, let's go take a look at I'm not going to go super in depth with our spear build, but you can take a look at it, and this is what I'm rocking. Well, this is my DPS build, and I just don't feel like respecing. Honestly, I would probably switch out Sweep for something else if I was being extremely serious about it, but it's mainly I'm just looking for Skewer and Perforate. Skewer, once we have the perk, applies tons of weaken, but also Perforate is going to apply some really good weaken as well. We read here, each attack inflicts a stack of weaken to the target, reducing target's outgoing damage by 10%. 4 or 5 seconds, max of 3 stacks. So we can add up to an additional 30% weaken. So we have 44 plus 30 plus 20. So I mean, we're max capping Thorpe all by ourselves when we're running spear and sword and shield. But also we're trying to keep rend up. Sure, maybe we have a DPS that's running this as well, but then they don't have to worry about getting animation stuck in Perforate or Skewer. Skewer is kind of goofy on Thorpe. It tends to get you hit by his backslash. So if as a tank, I can kind of face tank a little bit of that damage and apply Skewer and Perforate and just keep the damage up, or keep the weaken up and keep the rend up all by myself. And then plus we are running Whirling Blade to add extra rend. So we're applying tons of rend, we're applying tons of weaken, and that allows our DPS to just keep going to town. They can add their different versions of weaken as well, but they can go to town and keep on keeping on, out pumping that DPS. So that is why I tend to run spear on a lot of boss fights. It just depends, not all of them, but for Thorpe in general, that's going to be my build. So we got full slash damage mitigation. Didn't show you my jewelry yet, but this is what I would consider a BIS tanking slash protection amulet. We got health, we got divine, we got slash protection. Graveyard Seal. I do believe this one drops from the Starstone, and it needs to be like an M10 mutation or something like that. So highly recommend you go and farm this one up. It's going to come awesome anytime you need slash protection, for example, from Thorpe. So we also have a full second set of jewelry. Otherwise, we have this ring. Very, very good ring. Also, highly recommend you go and get this ring. It's going to be good as a DPS, and it's fine as a tank too. I do think the Simon Hacksilver ring is better as a tank, And this one I think is better as a DPS because it gives us the increased critical chance, which is really important as a DPS. So extra slash damage, extra leeching, Legate's Ring. And the main point of it is, though, we got the leeching and slash damage, but then we also have a extra ability to slot, without changing out gems every time. We can just slot the gems once and be done, and just hit gear swap and we're good to go. Then once again, our earring, we do have some dexterity on this, which is fine. The main thing is that we just need something that has despised, refreshing toast, and it also has a gem slot for an extra 5% slash damage absorption. So we are all the way up to 50% slash damage resistance, which is massive. It makes the fight so much easier. If you get a full team that's got a full swap to slash damage mitigation, Thorpe becomes easy. He's a pain in the butt. So many teams just wipe on him, can't even finish him. But you want that endgame content? Well, sometimes you gotta have those endgame builds with full gear swaps. Is it possible to do without a full gear swap? Yes, of course it is. But this is all about trying to be as efficient as possible at that endgame content. So there you have it. Little bonus there. Make sure you understand bosses' mechanics. They do not convert to whatever the mutation type is. So sometimes you're going to need to swap out some gear for the bosses specifically. So make sure you know what the main damage type of each boss is. So that covers all of our gear, covers all of our builds. And well, let's go ahead and walk you through a nice depths run. Sorry, I gotta cut in with one thing real quick here before we jump into the run. Forgot to add this anywhere else in my video, and it is massively important. So, right here, infused corrupted ward potions. Make these things your best friend. Don't be afraid to pop them like candy. Sure, they cost a little bit, but if you want to do that endgame content, sometimes that's what it takes. You get ready to start a big pull, go ahead and pop one of those. You're starting to run through a sketchy place where you might get CC'd by some mobs. Go ahead and just pop one and then make the run, make the pull. As soon as you start to set up a big sketchy pull, go ahead and just pop one. You start a boss fight and it could be a sketchy boss fight, just go ahead and pop one right at the start. Take it pre, make sure, you time them for a good time. Or you find yourself a little bit in trouble and you have one ready and it's not on cooldown, just go ahead and pop one. These ward potions, they're going to be your best friend. Make sure you got these. The level 5 ward potions. If you're not trying to be serious about runs, sure, you could get a lower level one. You could not use one at all, but if you're trying to push for that endgame content, make these guys your best friend. Increased damage absorption from corrupted by 15% for 30 seconds, or after receiving damage 15 times. So, massively important. Sorry, I forgot to add this in anywhere else in the rest of the video. So, if you pay attention throughout the video, you're probably going to see me pop these at different times, but a lot of times it's either if I see myself getting into a little bit of trouble, I'm going to go ahead and pop one, or if I'm starting a big pull, I'm going to go ahead and pop one. Unfortunately, in this run, I couldn't get my team to do any big massive pulls like I wanted to, so there's no real huge pulls in this video, but nonetheless, it does the job as, a good tank guide. So there's a little bit in this guide, in this walkthrough, what not to do, a little bit what to do, some examples of things that go wrong as a team, some examples maybe of things that go right as a team. So overall, it should be a pretty good guide for you, but I had to include this. So important. Make these your best friend. Level 5 ward potions. And the rest, of course, I got the infused health potions. Of course, I got the infused regeneration potions. If you happen to have healthy toast, I would go ahead and slot a mana pot here. If you have healthy toast on your earring, by chance, you get lucky enough that you have refreshing toast, despised, and healthy toast. But a hearty meal, it's sometimes enough to give you that extra boost to jump your health up when you get into a sticky situation. But yeah, just had to include this, but enjoy the run. And we are off. So we are working our way up to our very first pull of the dungeon. So we're basically just running through and we're grabbing line of sight aggro. So it is really important that your DPS have a clue what they're doing. If your DPS don't have a clue what they're doing, well, they're going to steal all your aggro and they're going to be crying the whole dungeon that, oh, you're such a terrible tank, you can't hold aggro for the life of you. Well, a lot of times that's on the DPS and not always on the tank. So DPS have an incredibly important job, and well, I am going to be dropping a DPS guide, so highly recommend checking that out because it's important that everybody understands everybody's responsibilities. So keeping things moving along, we go ahead and take advantage of our little path of destiny to grab the guy on the far side. We group everything up, taunt them, and we mob them right on down and try to move things along. We go ahead, we start working on opening the seal. Well, our DPS try to finish off the last of them. I mean, typically you're going to have a DPS, or even better yet, the healer's going to come and open up this seal, because as a tank you can do a little bit of damage, but you can hold the aggro while the DPS finish him off, and the healer, he can drop his sacred and then he can just open the seal. Ideally that's what happens, but anyways, that's besides the point. So yeah, anyways, just keep moving right along. So right here on this part, once I taunt this archer, realistically what we should do is just keep moving. Once I have that archer taunted, he is going to follow me as long as nobody else steals his aggro, and we can move along to the next pull. Yeah, sure, archers are super annoying, and if you leave them to roam, they can take somebody out, but if you're trying to do, end game type of runs, you're trying to move things along, maybe you want to try and work towards getting leaderboard type runs, well, sitting there and fighting one mob at a time, even if it is an archer, it's not any good. So move along, let the tank grab his aggro, and just move right along with life. So this next part, I would prefer actually just to get this boss, let's mow him right on down, and we're gonna mob everything else down in one giant pull. So our healer didn't understand what I was intending to do, so he did go and grab a few extra mobs, but anyways, yeah, I asked him not to, but I think he didn't, just whatever, miscommunication. So it is what it is. We can kill these mobs along with the boss. The boss would die faster if we could just focus the boss alone. Ideally I would grab the boss and I'd pull him all the way up top, but unfortunately, most groups, people do start dying when you do that pull. Kind of a big pull, then when you have the boss in the mix of things, people start dying. So ideally, we would have just killed the boss solo and we would have pulled everything else right up to the top. So just line of sighting things once again. So if your DPS go and steal aggro, that's their fault. That's on them. A lot of times, I tried to do a run before this, had DPS that kept stealing aggro, and then they would just run around like chickens with their heads cut off, and well, just crying the whole run that they had aggro. As a DPS, like I said, please watch my next DPSing guide video. It's really important. So one thing that's also important is, well, you can see I got stuck here on my own fighting this massive group of mobs. So a lot of times you can have failed runs and, everyone's going to blame you because you're the tank, right? Well, sometimes it's because your team, well, they sat and fought like one mob forever. Don't fight one mob at a time. That isn't what you do in M10s. You group up large groups of mobs and you mop them up in one swift go of things. So got myself in trouble there because, well, our team, they stayed behind fighting one mob at a time when I'm trying to move things right along. So once again, we're just line of sighting. So as long as nobody else steals that line of sight, you get that line of sight and it's going to hold for a little while. And then your DPS, they either can stay behind far enough that they don't steal the aggro, or else they can kite and, kind of get behind you. Things get grouped up, you taunt them, and there you go. Look at that nice, beautiful group. So a couple of laggers you always got to be careful about. Those creepy crawler things, they're super slow moving. So one thing that is very easy to happen, you get this nice group of mobs, and those crawlers, well, they can sneak in from the back and take somebody out. That's one place where if you have your Path of Destiny up and ready to go, it can be handy to grab their aggro back while they are still catching up. So here, ideally, once again, somebody should have been opening up this Azoth seal. Well, you were working on the fight, preferably the healer, but obviously some people still don't understand the mechanics of cruising through an M10. But it is what it is. It's kind of the life of running pubs, but some people are still learning and haven't done them as much, so sometimes just gotta work on helping them figure things out a little bit. Nothing wrong with that. So once again, we do get a DPS that dies because, well, he got too close and either stole some aggro. Not too sure what happened, but the DPS, they either should stay far enough behind to not steal aggro, or else they have to know how to kite and dodge through. So there's nothing you can do about that as a tank. You know, if you're running through, you know, you get in line of sight aggro so you can pull everything up into one big group, but somebody runs and does something dumb and gets themselves killed, there's minimal you can do about that. So you do the best you can, and if your DPS, they're running around stealing aggro and crying the whole game that you're terrible as a tank, you can't hold any aggro, well, maybe sometimes you don't know what you're doing, but other times the DPS are the ones that don't know what they're doing when they're stealing aggro and not dragging it to you as the tank. So, now this guy's pretty basic, but ideally you want to drain his stamina, so we're trying to do heavy attacks to him. We're applying our debuffs, we're applying our rend, and yeah, just making sure we open up the fight. So unfortunately our healer did sneak down just in front of me, grabbed the line of sight aggro, but so we do what we can to recover it. We get most of it back, not quite in time before the healer goes down, but in time enough that after they get the healer down, they do switch their aggro over to me. So, but nonetheless, I have to keep things moving, so I get their aggro and I keep moving, and once I have the aggro, it leaves our DPS available to freely revive our healers, so we're still good to go. But that's the way it goes. There's not much you can do about it when somebody gets ahead of you and steals aggro. The problem is your taunts are limited, so you don't have endless taunts to just waste and throw around all the time. You gotta time them decently properly. Ideally, you're not shockwaving the very first group because they get stunned and, well, then they don't group up quite as nicely. So it's so much better if you can just line of sight things, and if your DPS allows that line of sight to happen. So right here I run around and I kind of line of sight everything. I grab the aggro of that range stuff that's, you know, through the doorway, and then I come and hide behind the corner. What that is going to do, well, it is going to force that range to come around the corner to try and get a line of range at me, and it groups them up nicely. So you can see, even though this pull, it can be pretty annoying, different people do it different ways. Sometimes they'll bring it into that cubby hole there, but you know, if you line of sight everything around a corner and then you group up on the range mobs, you know, makes things go nicely. So no matter what, you end up with a couple of range guys that get kind of left out, and you kind of gotta finish off at the end. But so different ways you can do this. I love to take this pull and go all the way to the end. It's a pretty big pull though, and this group wasn't really feeling the big pulls, so we gotta do what we gotta do. At this point, I'm trying to move. There's one mob left, so we're not, maybe there's even two mobs left. We're not sitting there and fighting things one mob at a time, not at M10. So I'm moving along, getting the next pull started, and I turn around and oh wait, our team, nope, they're gonna fight things one at a time. So I kept trying to ask them, hold on, hey, don't fight one mob at a time, but kept doing it. But this just kind of goes to show you there's a lot that can go wrong. That's not necessarily going to be your fault as a tank. You're gonna take the blame because they're gonna, well, you're the tank, you're not holding aggro, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong. Well, you can't help it if your DPS are stealing aggro. DPS have an important job, and that is to kill things, not to steal aggro. If they want to take part in the pulls and they want to get at the front, they need to be good at dodging and kiting, just the way it is. So getting ready for this pull, I mark where I'm going to go. There's a bunch of range in this corner, so I mark, okay, I'm going to stack up here, and then I move forward and I grab the line of sight aggro of all of the melee, pull it into this corner, And well, we get a very nice, beautiful stack. Everything stacked up, melee, range, and there you go. Anytime you can, stack on the range because the range isn't going to come to the melee, but the melee will come to the range if you grab their aggro. So go ahead, get aggro on everything, bring it back to the range, stack it up, mow down everything in one. Range, melee, all the mobs. Go ahead and stack them anytime you can. There's going to be times where there's going to be a straggler or two left, so I'm marking like crazy because no matter how many times I mark and no matter how times I keep moving along, the DPS just keeps fighting one mob at a time, like I mentioned once or 3 times already in this video, but it is what it is. I'm going to try to keep pushing, going to try to keep them coming along. So go and grab the aggro, and there's this one last mage left, and I'm pretty sure you have to kill him in order to open the portal. So that's why we come and stack back on him. Even though it's just one mage, if we can stack everything on this one mage, it's gonna be good because we kill all these melee guys and we kill the mage. The next portal we need to get through, it's not gonna open until we kill that mage and a certain number of the other mobs. So we do have that one archer behind us that's sitting there shooting at us. We could have stacked on him, but the reality is we don't even need to kill that archer. So it's actually more important to stack on this mage. Get everything mowed down. Skip this archer. Move along. Get going. You don't need to sit here and kill things one at a time. You do need X amount of kills, so you can't skip absolutely everything unless you're doing a speed run. But if you're doing a points run, you need to hit all of your multipliers. So this part, I just run to the bottom. Somebody else can run to the bottom, also and pull everything to you, but it's whatever. They were still sticking behind, working on killing one mob at a time. So I go down, I grab the aggro of everything, and one thing I like to do here, stick to the left side. If you stick on the left side, you're not even going to grab the aggro of the mobs on the right side. So this part, it can be super annoying because you get range that spawns in all over the place. But what I was telling my healer is just go ahead, keep dropping the sacred in this one spot, no matter what, whether I'm on it or not. Just stack that sacred right there, and if there's always a sacred up right there, the DPS should know where to go if they get in trouble. There's no excuse for anybody to die if there is a sacred that's always down in one spot that everybody knows where it is. So we're avoiding the right side because that way we don't pull those mobs. It just makes life a whole lot easier. So this pull, it can get pretty annoying if you get the aggro of everything and you got all kinds of range all over the place, and it's hard to get everything to stack up perfectly. But if you kind of stick to this left side, you can get things to stack fairly nicely. Anytime there's range spawning in and they can start targeting our healer or somebody, I do try and go grab their aggro, but then I move right back to the stack. If I can, I'll line of sight them around the corner, but ideally right here, one of your DPS are opening this Azoth seal, but they didn't really seem to have the initiative to do this kind of stuff, so I gotta keep moving along, so I'm gonna go ahead and do it myself as long as I can. But once things group up, I gotta go and get the taunt, get the aggro, and well, start mowing down these units. So once we got the next door open, though, for the most part, we're gonna just try and move along, kill a couple more of these mobs, and then move along. Gotta keep things moving. You're gonna play the M10 level, you gotta keep things moving. Don't sit and fight things one mob at a time. So, like this Tendril, typically I try to get on the opposite side of my teams because these Tendrils, they tend to hit pretty hard. So if you can get on the opposite side of your team, but you also want to heavy attack. Apply as much weaken as you can, apply as much rend as you can, but heavy attack it to drain his stamina. So right here, it was also super annoying. I line of sight everything as long as nobody steals the aggro. It's all going to group up on me. I pull it to this archer. Oh wait, what the heck happened? Okay, everybody stole everything from me. There's no reason, no excuse for that, but it's whatever. We come, we do what we can, we group it back up, and we're good to go. So ideally, every single one of those mobs, there's no excuse for them to not have followed me all the way up to the archer. We get a nice stack on that archer, and we can also start adding the mobs from the top, and we get a nice group. So instead of killing these things one little group at a time, so much better. You get some nice stacks, and it's so much faster to kill everything in one big group rather than one at a time. So Archer comes down, does get some aggro on our healer, but go ahead and taunt everything that's remaining down there, and I move along to the top. Hopefully they're gonna follow me, but just don't know the way it's been. They've been sticking around and stealing the aggro back, fighting things one at a time. But do the best you can to keep things moving along. Grab the taunts, move along, and get things low. Move on to the next group. Move on to the next pull. So we do get a nice, decent pull here. The healer did go ahead and pull this boss early, which I like. That means that we can get 2 in 1. We can kill some mobs along with the boss at the same time. So anytime you can kill multiple mobs at once, do damage to multiple things at one time, it's just going to be so much more efficient. So go ahead, drop our taunts whenever we have them available, and whenever they're going to be efficient to grab a taunt of many things at one time. Occasionally there's going to be times where we get into a situation where somebody might be in trouble, so we have to waste a taunt on one single mob. Ideally we don't do that, but there are situations. So here you just need to farm. Don't need to kill anything, just trying to grab the aggro of everything. And I see this one crawler is going to go chasing after our friend there, so I go and I grab his aggro back. And main goal here as a tank, you're just here to hold aggro on everything while your teammates do the mining. And ideally the healer's not doing the mining, because he should be healing anybody that needs healing, but it's what it is. It's fine. We can survive it just fine. So we finish mining, finish holding aggro, and we just move right along. So this first boss, if this was not a void mutation, you would want to be adding at least at the minimum a void damage absorption amulet. But if you're really getting serious, you could have a full you could have a full gear swap to void. So that would be awesome if you could have. But the problem is, you also would want a gear swap at Thorpe, and he's just as important. So at that point, you could be in need of 3 full gear swaps for this dungeon. But you definitely could get away with just a full jewelry swap at each place, or even just an amulet swap is enough. But it is ideal to have at minimum a full jewelry swap. So it's going to give you a lot more survivability. So with this boss fight, if we can stick on the boss every time he spawns dogs, we try and save our taunts. You can see my shockwave. I seen him spawn in the next wave of dogs. As long as I'm right in the middle on the boss, well, my shockwave, it is going to hit all of the dogs, so we are going to get a taunt off on all of the dogs. So mainly what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to stay in the middle. I'm trying to save my taunts for those specific situations. But now we go through the first phase. All the DPS, they're going to go up and kill the mobs real quick. Healer's going to focus on keeping them alive for what he can. And my goal is just to survive. I'm going to try and do damage what I can to these dogs, see if I can finish off at least 1 or 2 of them. But mainly, the name of the game here is just stay alive. And, just tank these dogs. See, I can just stun them, and then I can just sit there and buy time while they're stunned. And then I can stun them again, sit there and buy some more time, if I get in trouble. Ideally, I keep doing some extra damage to them, but if need be, I just stun them and buy time, wait, and then when they come on stunned, stun them again. So once again at this phase, there's a couple different ways you can do it. You can keep grabbing aggro of the dogs and kiting them while your DPS kills the boss, but this part, I just assume to kind of keep grouping everything up. Unfortunately, our DPS, maybe we didn't have as many gravity wells as would be nice, but you could see they're getting chased around the map. Where if you have a bunch of gravity wells, you just constantly keep everything stacked up. So ideally at this point, as the tank, you get up here first because whoever comes in first is going to get the initial aggro of these mobs. So we get up here, we try and get a taunt on them, then we go ahead and apply our debuffs, we apply our rend, and ideally we get the aggro and we're trying to do some damage to them, and our DPS is going to be the main damage dealer. You can see we almost get them killed. The other DPS does end up going down, but it's low enough that we can finish them off on our own. So you can see there, it is nice as a tank at times if we can have some damage output, because if we have like 0 damage output and we can't finish off that mob on our own, well, that's not going to be ideal. So we are not first and foremost focusing on damage. We're first and foremost focusing on utility as a tank, but secondarily we are looking for as much damage as possible. But this part, we're just trying to grab aggro of all the dogs. Boss is almost dead, so we hold aggro of the dogs, let our DPS freely finish off the boss, and we are good to go. So one thing you're going to want to do as a tank, you got to keep track of the mob count. So if you keep pushing through and you don't have enough mob kills, well, you're going to get yourself in trouble. So I'm checking how many mob kills we have just so I'm aware. Can we skip more mobs? Do we have to kill more mobs? Well, these two little swarmers, they're super squishy and, you know, they're easy kills. So go ahead and, you know, if you need the mob count, just wipe them off. Wipe them down real quick. So just making sure that we get this Blight Crag here. Couple of the places the DPS were a little bit skipping some of those, so I just wanted to make sure that they noticed it was there, seen it was there, then we move right along. And you know, we have this one archer, but mostly everything else is here is melee. I think there's a couple mages, there's that one little guy that chucks his darts in the background too, but pretty basic. We just run into the middle here and stack on the archer, and the majority of the rest of this is going to stack with us too. So anytime you can, obviously you're gonna stack as much range as you can on top of each other. Doesn't always work, but at least try to stack, you know, the group on at least one of the range if you can. If you can, line of sight the range around the corner, make the range group up on you. So moving right along. See, there's one mage in here, some swarmers, but we're just going to move right on through. We're going to grab aggro on this stuff. And in a sense, it'd be nice if we could get back to that mage back there. But kind of a pain. Swarmers that are knocking everybody around, including myself. So we're just going to go ahead and we're going to stack everything up right here. Right in the middle. Reality is, if we need to, we can just move around. We don't have to finish killing off that mage. We can keep moving around the next corner and that mage will be forced to follow us. Nothing wrong with that. So you can see I'm trying to keep an eye on the mob count, because I know we're a little bit tight on mob count because we have been skipping when we can, when there's something we want to skip. But usually I don't do this pull, but since we skipped enough mobs, we got to do this pull in order to. So this is one pull you can skip. You can go in the middle and pull the boss from the other side. So we got this boss pulled, and we pull him to all of this range. But we need the mob kills, so we go ahead and we stack everything up with this boss. And you know, we don't lose a whole lot of time because we have to kill the boss anyways, and we're doing some AoE damage, getting some damage to the boss and the mobs at the same time. So obviously it's faster to kill this boss all by himself, but we do need the mob kills, so we go ahead and stack it all up. Stack up the range, stack up this boss on top of the range, and then from there we're just going to move on. Once this boss is killed, you know, I'm checking the mob count. Okay, we're close enough that, you know, maybe we get this one extra kill, but then we can move along. There's just enough kills that we can finish off left over. So once you go through this portal, if you don't have enough mob kills, you're screwed. You can't get any more unless you go through many cycles with Thorpe. There is a way that you can get extra mob kills on Thorpe, but ideally you don't want to take that chance if you don't have to. So this last little boss, he's super squishy, he doesn't do much damage. We open up with a taunt and we go ahead and we hit him with our whirling blade to add some rend. You know, that's going to be kind of the typical opener. You go ahead and you taunt everything, You're going to try and get them grouped up. Then you're going to hit Whirling Blade to add as much rend as you can to as many of the mobs as you got grouped up. Obviously, if it's just one mob, well, you just add rend to that one mob and you move right along. So we are keeping an eye. We are at 154 out of 160. We can get somewhere around 2 to 4 kills, mob kills on the boss. So we do still need a few more kills. A lot of times you can skip these 2 mobs here, but if you skip enough stuff like we did up there earlier in the run, you might have to kill these mobs, so keep an eye on that. And well, our mob count is low enough, we do have to get these kills, so go ahead and pull these guys and we're gonna go ahead and mow them down. And of course should be stacking on this archer, but it is what it is. Can't make them if they don't want to, but better to kill 2 at one time instead of 1 at one time and then 1 more at another time. But it's all good. We're still making some pretty good time. You can see we have 14 minutes left before we have to be done, but ideally we finish with time remaining. So checking the mob count, we still need 3 more mobs, and that means, well, Thorpe, he spawns brutes. Those brutes, they actually do count for mob kills. So that means we need to kill at least 3 brutes. Sometimes you can get away with just killing 2 of them if your team is strong enough. But here we are, you know, you can see we switched over to our Thorpe gear set. So we got tons of slap mitigation and slash mitigation, and we also have our spear on. So I'm trying to let my teammates know that we need to kill at least 3 of the brutes so we can maximize our points. So got switched over to my new weapons, got coats applied to them. I didn't have my, unfortunately I would have been already changing my attributes, but I had to try and explain to my team what we needed to do. So, you know, wasn't able to do it through voice chat, unfortunately, so get myself in a little bit of trouble. I should have already taunted Thorpe here, but I was still trying to finish off my attribute switch, you know. I could have probably got away without switching my attributes, but I would have been below 200 constitution, which makes you a little bit squishy versus Thorpe. And you can see he does some pretty big damage. So you see the purple circles on me, and we have some DPS that don't understand the mechanic of you need to touch the purple circle. So look at our bow back there. He's not doing damage. He's doing 50% less damage because he wants to ignore the mechanics of the dungeon. So super important. If you want to do that end game content, you need to understand the mechanics. So Thorpe's going to take longer to kill because we got some DPS that are doing 50% less damage right now. So, but anyways, we have tons of slash mitigation. So Thorpe, he's crazy. You can have him full taunted and just do an attack here and there, and he's still going to go chasing after your teammates. So I go full damage mitigation here, and I got all kinds of hated on my gear, and I'm just basically just sitting here face tanking. I'm applying my debuffs every time I can, but then I'm switching to my sword and shield, because when I have my sword and shield on, my teammates do 10% additional damage, which is huge. So you can see I'm mad, you know, other than the first mishap where I didn't have him taunted right after the start because I was switching my attributes, unfortunately, I am able to keep Thorpe's aggro pretty nicely here. It's very hard to do. He is a huge pain. So he does this little stab into the ground with his sword. Important to pay attention to that, because if he hits you with it, he will stun you. But when he lifts up his sword to stab it, just kind of dodge around to his side and you're going to be fine. And when he does do that animation, anybody within his, you know, there's a little circle that it's going to show you whether you're going to get hit by it or not. But as long as you avoid the stabbing to the ground, you can cancel out that animation. See, he's going to stab into the ground. I go around the backside of him and I attack him and try to cancel out that little mechanic that he does. So anytime you see him ready to stab into the ground, avoid it, otherwise he's going to CC you, and get around the backside and just DPS him. So you can see I'm just sitting here basically face tanking. Typically I try to stay away from face tanking, but there are certain situations where I'm going to do it, and this is one of those situations because Thorpe, most tanks, they cannot keep his aggro, and I don't blame him, because you can have him fully taunted, you can have him fully aggroed, and he's still going to take after other people. But when he does these weird animations where he pauses and he wants to chase after someone, if you just go crazy, see right there, you gotta attack him, dodge his stab in the ground, and then attack him. So keep on attacking him. Sometimes when he does those little animations where it looks like he wants to go chasing your teammates, if you just keep attacking him, well, it tends to change his mind, it seems like. But no matter what, there are times that he's going to go chasing after other people. But it's all about being incredibly aggressive with Thorpe. So that's why we're going full slash damage mitigation, and we're going spear, so we can keep adding skewer, so we can keep adding rend to him. So you can see we switch back to our spear again. We hit him with that skewer, add tons of weaken. We hit him with our perforate to add more weaken, but also to add perforate to help our teammates do extra damage. So really strong combination as a tank to run skewer, spear, and keep him perforated, keep him skewered, keep him weakened, keep up the rend with your whirling blade, keep up the weaken with your shield rush, and just I think it's one of the strongest combos for tanking on certain bosses. So that's what I like to do, especially on Thorpe. So right here, I'm actually going to taunt the beast. Thorpe is so low that ideally at this point, the DPS focus on finishing off Thorpe. I get the aggro of the beasts, and then, or the brutes I guess you'd call them, and then we focus to finish off Thorpe, and there you have it. Got our nice gold run. 31.5 minutes, 8.5 minutes to spare. So not a terrible run, you know, nice and clean, no full deaths, no full team wipes, none of that kind of stuff. We got every single gatherable, cleared it with 8.5 minutes to spare. So a nice solid 72k gold run. So definitely not a top of the leaderboard type of run, but nonetheless pretty nice and clean. Reasonably clean anyways for being a pub group. So that kind of covers it. You got any questions, go ahead, drop them in the comments. But I hope you find something useful from this. And like I mentioned, I am going to be dropping a DPS guide, and you cannot be successful as a tank unless you have DPS that are, you know, being proper themselves. So go ahead, I would highly encourage you check that out. It takes a full group that has combinations of crowd control plus weaken to add to the mobs, and a combination of, you know, DPS and healer that are not stealing aggro, and anytime they do steal aggro, they need to know how to skirt, they need to know how to dodge, they need to know how to pull that aggro to the boss. So I'm gonna have a good DPS guide and a walkthrough of this same dungeon as a DPS, and I'm going to show you, you know, I do some pulling for the tank, pulling aggro of the mobs, do some skirting, but also, you know, you're making sure you let things set up properly. You're not stealing aggro from the tank and then running away and crying to your tank that you're such a terrible tank, you can't hold aggro for the life of you. Well, chances are that is your fault as a DPS. So go ahead, hit that subscribe, and keep your eyes peeled for that DPS guide. And until then, we'll catch you on the next one.